It's a joy to be here. I'm going to read a dream and a birth. 1963, January 3rd, 10 a.m. I still feel at low level, no drive, financial problems the main cause, and the prospect of going to work. Whoa. Oops. The rent is 3 days overdue today, $13.50. I have $1 and am faced with selling my collected poems of Wallace Stevens. God damn it. Had a dream that I was in a bakery when a man pointed a gun at the waitress and tried to hold up the place. She looked at me imploringly, and I calmly disarmed the man without violence. He ran out. Later, I was at home. I'd quietly left when Dick Gallup and Johnny Stanton ran in excitedly and told me W.H. Auden wanted to see me back at the motel restaurant, the bakery of earlier. They brought me a menu autographed by Auden as an award for my heroics. I thought the menu was going to be autographed by Rilke, and so was a little disappointed, but still excited. However, I remained calm. At the motel, I sat with Auden and his family and Dick and Johnny. Auden called me Ted twice and talked excitedly about my heroics, how I had managed it. He praised me lavishly. I said little, felt less excited about the whole thing. I noticed that at the end of the discussion, he called me Berrigan. Later at home, I was thinking I had wanted to talk to him about John Ashbery and not about my heroics, but he'd only been interested in them. A few weeks ago, I dreamed that I visited John Ashbery at his home, which was a farm. He was about my age, and we liked each other. I gained much insight into his poems by seeing him on the farm among his brothers and sisters, all younger, and I realized that his poetry was about his personal life. During a tour of the farm, as he was showing me around, a field hand or a neighbor farmer came up and said that one thing that he was unsure of in Ashbery's poem was the meaning of the word block. And John, the farmer referred to him as John, answered that he used block to mean large or big. The farmer thanked him and said that this cleared up many things for him. Then he drove away on a tractor. I awakened from this dream feeling very elated and good. The arrival report. Saturday, August 3rd, 1974. Today at 12:30 noon, Alice delivered her baby. A big purple boy with black hair, long feet, and long, thin fingernails. He weighed 8 pounds, 10 ounces, and looks like Anselm, and even more so. Last night, Friday, Robert Clark came over, and we watched Kiss of Death and talked. He left after 1 a.m. and went upstairs where Alice had called me from and changed Anselm's diaper and talked to him. Then I got into bed, and Alice made me realize it was starting, though she was hesitant to decide it really was because she didn't want me to take her a day early like last time. But I could tell. We talked, and I kept my hand on her thigh, and I could feel the pains go through her. The baby book I'd taken from the hospital said that when the pains were over 40 seconds in duration and with 5-minute intervals to go, I talked Alice into letting me time her, and I timed her for 40 minutes from 2 a.m. to 2:40. The pains were lasting 40 to 50 seconds. The intervals were 10 seconds, and so over 5 minutes. Alice insisted they were too mild yet, but the book said they'd be mild. It was duration that counted. I told her my theory was to call the hospital and tell them the facts and see what they said. She said, okay. As her last 2 pains were not so mild, I called, and the ward sister of Flat 2, the obstetrics wards, who had calm, sweet, but efficient voice, listened as I told her who I was, that Alice was overdue. The doctor had predicted July 26th, that she seemed to be in labor now. They had scheduled to bring her in Sunday and induce labor. Well, that's been happening tonight, said the sister, and I told her. Has she had a show? She asked, meaning a discharge of blood, and I said yes. Well, we'd better have her in then, she said. Okay, what door? And she said, right up the front door and ring the bell. Thank you. Let's go, I said to Alice, and she said, all right, and began getting up. I told her word for word what the sister had said, so I called Gordon Brotherston first, and no money. Then I tried Celia Decker, and she was distressed, but Andrew McCulloch's van was full of furniture. He too was dismayed at not being able to help. It's okay, I said, we'll get a cab. I called 976-266, and minicabs answered. I told them who and where, and they said right away. Alice packed Middlemarch and the selected poems of Frank O'Hara and left her wallet and keys at home, and I got dressed, and we went downstairs. Her suitcase had been packed for 2 weeks already. The cab came, and we sped through the Essex night, past the university, and down toward the orange streets, bumps of Colchester, not saying much. The driver was very nice, and he carried me before. At the hospital, they parked me on a staircase and took Alice away to change to a nightgown and bathrobe. Alice had left her lenses home and was wearing glasses. After 20 minutes or more, by now, well past 4 a.m., a nurse brought me the suitcase with clothes Alice had been wearing, and Alice came back. How do you like my outfit, she said, and I said, it looks beautiful. I kissed her goodbye and said, I'll be back. I called another cab. The sister told me to call the hospital around 7. It was 5:30 a.m. when I got home. There, I relieved Chris and Kathy, whom I'd called out of bed to sit with Anselm till I returned. They offered to come back at 7, but I said no, I'd manage. They were terrific to have come. I had a Valium and some cough medicine and finished reading Janis Joplin, how she died, sadly. I fell asleep and woke up at 7:10. The sister said, your wife is doing fine, call again around 9, so I slept again. Woke up at 9:15. The news from the hospital was the same, try later. I changed Anselm, gave him a bottle, left him in bed, and took a pill and dozed fitfully. Just before 12 noon, I called, and they said, come in, she's in the delivery room. I called Gordon, and he apologized for last night. I don't know how he knew. I guess Celia told him. Do you want the car, he said. Bring Anselm over, and we'll keep him with us. I dressed Anselm and told him we go bye-bye to see Katie, Gordon's daughter, and he laughed. I arrived at the hospital at 12:30 and asked the sister if I could go in and see the delivery, and she said, you've just this minute had a boy. Right then, they wheeled the baby out. He looked amazing and alert, but it was Alice I wanted right then. Go on in, the sister told me, and I did, and Alice looked beautiful. Tired but clear, more clear than in many weeks. She smiled at me, and I was nervous as a little kid. She told me all about the birth. She'd watched it all. It had been painful, but she had taken in every detail. The doctor hadn't arrived yet to stitch her. I told her where Anselm was, and she told me more about the birth, and we just held hands and talked, and I loved her very much for being all herself's own and part of mine. It was 1. I left to return at 3. In Colchester, I had breakfast, eggs, chips, sausage, Pepsi. Then I bought a Carrie Cat, 3 baby outfits, 6 pairs of baby rubber pants, pins, little baby vests, and then a PJ Wodehouse book. Sam the Sudden for Alice. It was tattoo day, whatever that is, and crowds lined in the streets, watching redcoats and other crazy-looking military bands march by, just like Bunker Hill, which, as Jack and Neil would say, was really Breed's Hill. I kept saying I'd bump into Herbie, get to tell him, and I didn't, so I called Gordon, and he was pleased for us, warmly congratulating, and said, keep the car as long as you need. So I visited Alice from 3 till 4, saw the baby again. Little Edmund, Joseph Berrigan, after my father and after Joe. Alice said, as soon as the baby comes out, you feel instantly healed. Home to sleep, talk to Gordon and Gissick, rest, call Becky, then my mother with the news, then an evening visit to Alice. I took her flowers from the garden. She's fine. Anselm is asleep in his bed. Doug Oliver called. Not the first to know, but the first to call and ask. His call completed the circle. Right now, it's 11:10 p.m. August 3rd, 74 is nearly over. Next up is Garrett Staples. Caples, sorry.
That's okay. Hello. Thanks to the Poetry Project for putting this on, and it's just a wonderful event to be part of. It's occasionally I get to do a book, and then you do a reading with the characters in the book, and this feels like one of those times. So I'm going to read from a piece Ted wrote for a gig, it sounds like, called Teaching with the School Teachers. It's a beautiful day, and I'm on my way uptown to 2 Central Park West, where the Ethical Culture Society awaits me. Today I'll teach a seminar on teaching poetry in the schools, or some such subject, to a group of New York school teachers. Okay, so I do so. Now here I am at the society. I go up to room 514. It's 3:15, so I'm early. There are about 8 people, both sexes, ranging in age from maybe 25 to 100. No, make that over 60. One man introduces himself. I am Howard Schlock, or something, he says. I blank, blank, blank for the academy. That's fine, I say. Nice to see you. Do more people show up? Oh yes, lots more, he says. Good, I say. We'll wait. I drink about 6 cups of delicious coffee. The room is a fine, spacious, airy room, very pleasant, everything nicely prepared, chairs in a circle with a big Samuel Johnson chair for me at the top of the circle. By 3:40, about 22 or 23 people are there, though I notice most don't sign in. I sit in my Dr. Johnson chair, wearing my Allen Ginsberg hair and Charles Manson beard, and say, hello, it's nice to see you all here. My name is Ted Berrigan. I'm a poet. I'm sure you've never heard of me, but I don't know you either. So let's do something about that. I give them my who am I routine. 36 years old, Korean vet, married, 2 children, taught at Yale, Michigan, Iowa, etc. Taught 8th grade once, read in high and junior highs all over God's creation, have 5 books published, blah, blah. Then I say, who are you? How many teach school? Nearly all do. Okay. One is a young black student, 18 or so, there with his teacher. One lady who just wandered in likes poetry and wants to save the trees in Central Park by handing out a poem she's writing right now. That is, writing it right now, but handing it out next week on Tree Day or something in the park. The teachers are all open, friendly, seem interested in the whole proceedings. I tell them of my various experiences reading to high school and junior high kids, how I get the kids' attention, how I would try to assure holding it, how there are sometimes difficulties. We all talk about that, how to get the kids to turn on to poetry, because that seems to be the central issue. One very bright woman remarks that she finally realized not long ago that it was not important that the kids like what she liked, that was not the most important thing at all. I agree completely. We all seem to agree on that the issue we want to cover is basically, how do you get the kids interested in this thing called poetry? The writing of it, the reading of it, the listening to it. How to get them to care. I warn them that there's no bullshit in poetry, that they can't teach the kids stuff they think is trash just to get the kids interested, that they themselves will have to search out the poems. I tell them Lawrence has some poems the kids can dig, William Carlos Williams, lots of older poets too. We all start naming poets, and we like this and get excited. The teachers talk to each other and share the experiences they've had that have been successful with readings to the kids. I asked them also to write me a short note, a few lines telling me what they'd like to learn here in these classes. I say they need not sign the notes, but that I'd like to know, and that if they don't know but simply came to see what might come out of it, that was perfectly valid. I asked how many write, not necessarily for professional careerist plans, but just wrote some poems ever. Nearly all did. I said I'd love to read their works, although I wouldn't criticize, but I would tell what I like in their works, and just about any poem has something in it to like. I said all they had to do was keep writing for 10 years, and then they could criticize their own poems, as all poets do, and as no one else can really do to much extent. I said that to me a poem was anything anyone called a poem. I didn't care to worry myself about what poetry was and wasn't. All that interested me is whether or not it moved me, surprised me, delighted me, bored me, etc. And, I added, a poet is simply a person who writes or has written poems, even one poem. Those definitions were not relevant to what we cared about, I thought. All this seemed to make the atmosphere loose and easy. Everyone participated plenty, though I did have to tell the tree lady that she couldn't read her tree poem right now, though she could read it after class to those who wanted to stay. Believe it or not, we also talked about a million other things, drank lots more coffee, and had a good time. We actually ran overtime, and I didn't get out till 5:45, nor did anyone leave, though I told them they could leave anytime they needed to. I loved the session, and these seemed like fine people. I wish I had about 6 weeks to spend on the project and could visit their classes. I wouldn't mind being paid more, should that ever develop, by the way. I need a car. Okay, that's it for my notes on the first session. Next notes will hopefully have some enclosures, poems written in class by me and the teachers in collaboration, etc. And finally, let me add, I'd very much like to be paid right after the third session, like the next day, for example, because I have to leave New York right soon afterwards. Yours in Ethical Culture, Ted Berrigan. And next up is a scholar and a gentleman, Nick Sturm.
Hi. It's been one of the great pleasures of my life to help edit this book. And I wanted to say, too, that I happened to spend the afternoon in the apartment of Katie Schneeman, George Schneeman's wife, and there's this incredible George Schneeman portrait on the front cover. So just to celebrate George Schneeman as one of the greatest New York artists of the 20th century. And to formally thank Katie Schneeman for allowing us to use it on the cover of this book. There's also a George Schneeman portrait of Ted Berrigan and Ron Padgett at the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. And the pants in the piece that Kay read, the pants that tore with the blue and gold, he's wearing those pants in that portrait. So that's part of your next visit. The church, as we call it here in the neighborhood, for me, to name at least one of its members, is in fact the church in my life. It has been, and has been the only church in my life for over 17 years. So just 2 sentences about the church. I'm going to read an interview with John Ashbery. This was published in The World in November 1967. And it's signed at the end Harlan Dangerfield, which is a collaborative pseudonym that he and Ron Padgett would use. In this case, though, it's just Ted. And this is kind of like his interview with John Cage that you might know about, that's collaged from all these other sources. John Cage had nothing to do with it. And in this case, John Ashbery had nothing to do with this one. I didn't know what the deal was with this text, this work. And Alice said, and Alice was like, oh yeah, that's just an interview with the star of Flipper. But every time Alice has said that, which has happened multiple times, she just says that. And then Anselm goes, you mean the dolphin? So this is an interview with John Ashbery. Q, what is your real name? A, John Ashbery. Actually, I do have a middle name, but I won't tell what it is. It's awful, and it begins with an A. Q, when and where were you born? A, I was born in New York City on April 4, 1947. Q, what is your height, weight, and coloring? A, I am 5 feet, 6 inches tall, weigh 188 pounds, have blonde hair and greenish blue eyes. Q, where do you live? A, I live in a 7-room cement and wood private house in Northeast Miami. Q, who lives with you? A, my mom, Helen, and dad, Eugene. I have an older brother who is in the Navy and an older married sis. Q. What kind of people do you enjoy being with? A. Young people who love having fun no matter where they are. Q. What is your hobby? A. Nothing. Except girls, I guess. Q. What is your favorite food? A. Anything Italian. Q. Who are your favorite movie stars? A. I have no special ones. I like adventure films and true life stories. Q. Who are your favorite recording stars? A. I like too many to name, but I'd say Roy Orbison is one of my number one favorite. Q. Who is your favorite TV star? A. Flipper, of course. Q. What is your favorite kind of music? A. Rock and roll. Right now I am flipped for the Zombies doing She's Not There. Q. What are your favorite colors? A. Blue, green, red, and tan. Q. Briefly describe your dream girl. A. She will be very sweet, have brown hair, and not be over 5 feet, 5 inches tall. Q. What is most important to you in a girl, looks or personality? A. Personality. I love gentle, warm girls. That's not a personality. Q. How do you like to see girls dressed? A. Any way that pleases them, but I do not like bikini bathing suits. Q. How do you like to dress? A. In continental cut clothes, wearing a shirt and tie. Q. Have you a secret longing? A. To drive a boat in an ocean race. Q. Q. For a vacation, where in the world would you like to go? A. To Englewood, Florida. It is on the Gulf side and has great fishing. Q. Of all the things you have to do, which do you dislike most? A. I really don't have any complaints. Q. Do you have a pet fear? A. No, nothing scares me. Q. What daily schedule would you keep if you could? A. I'd sleep till 9 and work till 7. I'd be in bed by 11 o'clock. Q. What are your favorite sports? A. Boating, water skiing, skin diving, and fishing. Q. Where do you go when you are alone? A. Go out in the racing boat, Formula 233, and bounce it around in rough seas. Q. Do you have any pets? A. I have a little bit of everything, dog named Whiskey. Q. Are you moody or temperamental? A. No, not at all. Q. What 3 secret tips would you give a girl who would like for you to like her? A. She should be very considerate. She should not talk to me about TV, and she should dress in a neat, nice manner at all times. Q. Have you ever dated a fan? A. Yes. When I was living in New York, I got a very nice letter from a girl. I called her and took her out, and we had a great time. Q. What has been the greatest thrill of your life? A. Picking out my car. I got a maroon GTO with a white top. Q. What is the most unforgettable experience you have had? A. The first time I went skin diving, the beautiful colors under the water were unbelievable. Q. How would you describe yourself? A. I consider myself a regular guy, not outstanding in any particular way. Q. What is your pet weakness? A. Boats. Every time I see one, I have to jump into it. Q. What is your ultimate ambition? A. To be a good human being. Q. Who has helped you the most with your career? A. Frankly, I've done most of it on my own. It's a good Ashbury. Q. What do you worry about? A. When you work all day and have to memorize a script, you feel you may not do so well. Q. What do you like best about your work? A. Diving with full gear on. You can stay under for an hour or so. Q, what do you dislike about your career? A, I love everything. It is always interesting. I hate having to do homework when I'm soaking wet, though. Q, how do you relax? A, I put on a stack of records, lie on the bed, and sip a Coke. Q, where is the best place to write to you? A, 12100 Northeast 16th Avenue, Miami, Florida. The next reader is Anselm Berrigan.
Hi. I want to thank Alina, Kay, and Alexis for being able to take part in this willingly. and I want to thank Ted for making friendship be an important part of his work on his life. And so many of his friends are my friends. It's not a small thing. And I'm going to read this thing called On the Road Again, an Old Man. It's on page 147 if you want to read along. Basho's Journey, from the Records of a Weather-Exposed Skeleton, 1684. Matsuo Basho, 1644 to 1694. For Anselm Hollow and Steve Hamilton. Introduction. Following the example of Kuang Wen, priest of olden times who is said to have traveled thousands of miles caring little for provisions and experiencing states of ecstasy under the pure beams of the moon, I left my broken-down house on the river Sumida in August of the first year of Gyokyo among the whales of the wind. Matsuo Basho. Determined to go. I cannot help the sore wind blowing through my heart. Determined despite sure fall to a weather-exposed skeleton. After 10 autumns, Ido, my mind points back to you, my home. At the barrier gate. In a way, it was fun not seeing Fujiyama in rainy fog. A scene before my eyes. Roses of Sharon by the side of the road, perishing one by one in the mouth of a horse. At the precipice of Sayo no Nakayama, on horseback half asleep, I saw as if in a dream the distant moon trailing a line of clouds. In the morning, tea. At the shrine of Fubaku, no moon, in total darkness, a powerful wind embraces the ancient cedars. At Saigyo's hermitage, here the poet Saigyo would have written the poem of the woman washing potatoes in the stream. My mother's white hairs. Should I hold them in my hand, they would disappear under my hot tears, icicles that burn me. Temple bells. Out from the somber darkness, in the silence of the night, ring, that I might at least hear your sounds, my dear temple wife. At Saigyo's spring. I like this experiment, to wash the dust of the world in droplets of dew. in the house of the poet Bokuin. I am still alive at the end of a long dream on my way, close of an autumn day. At the Honto temple in Kuwana, midwinter peonies, a distant power singing. Did I hear a cuckoo in the snow falling? At the seashore, early dawn, a young whitefish, shining ephemeral white, barely 1 inch long. The Atsuta shrine. Among the ruins, even the weeds are dead. I bought and ate rice cake at an inn. Passing through Nagoya, I plod along like Chikusai, a little crazy myself with poetry among the wails of the wind. Sleeping head on grass pillow, hears now and then the nocturnal dog bark in the passing rain. Nagoya, gladly, dear merchants of the town, will I sell my hat laden with snow. Passing a traveler, in the morning snow, even a horse is a spectacle I cannot help stopping to see. Dusk, over the darkening sea, only the voice of a flying duck is visible in soft white. New Year's Day, with my hat on my head and straw sandals on my feet, I met on the road the end of the year. A plum orchard by Mitsui Shufu's house near the Naruki waterfall at Kyoto. Blanket of white plum. I wonder were the cranes stolen or hidden beneath the plum blossoms. A sturdy oak in the plum orchard, totally indifferent to the blossoms. On the way to Otsu, I picked my way through mountain, and I was greeted by a smiling violet in a shop. Branches of wild azalea thrown in a bucket, a woman tearing meat from a dried codfish, and the country of Kai. What luxury for a traveling horse to feed on wheat at a hospitable inn. Home after several days of rest. Everything gone. I still have lice I picked up on the road, alive in my summer robes. Note. Knowing no Japanese, I worked with the renderings of Nobuyuka Yuasa into English of some of the poems in Basho's The Narrow Road to the Deep North and other travel sketches, Penguin Books, Ltd., Harmonsworth, Middlesex, England, Penguin Classic, L185, 1970. My sense has been for the preceding set of poems to form a complete book in itself, not for the poems to be simply a selection of favorites or whatever from Basho. I owe and hereby acknowledge a great debt to the translations by Anselm Hollow of gypsy poems, though by no means are my works his fault. 1978, New York City. Please welcome Greg Masters.
Hi, hello. This is a review Ted wrote about Jim Brodey, the poet Jim Brodey, in 1967. Note on Jim Brodey's poems and him. Brodey's poems have always been good and involved. I have always, as have many other young poets of the first string New York early 20s and 30s, been fascinated by their unique weight and puzzled by the amount of rumination he has taken aside from himself to produce them. Brody seems intent on erasing everything, images, from sight, then bringing them back completely transformed, see prophecy, into something else. He does this remarkably, right in front of your eyes. Not just word-nerve combinations, but flowing structures to amaze the gloom of lower Manhattan. He has, I know, passed through Pound's and Williams and Olson's breath unit home study course. The discipline inherent in Kerouac's locomotive meditations, which looks so easy when read, is fed back to him, but in mad overdubbing stanzas. Even Whitman, Melville, Washington Irving ghost taking leave of senses is blown through this poet's every cellular rephrase. But Brody is highly original. His stanzas stem from reawakenings at the toss of some revolving sky mandalas and hungry angel in the cortex divinity. I've been personally aware of many of these works herein for quite some time. I even once or twice have tried to explain their beauty at length, but was unsuccessful because of all one has to hear in these poems, in what you read. Brody has 3 other manuscripts, unpublished poems, and a novel, The Horrible, which I hope some editor will grab to make print. His zigzag is unearthly sometimes. This book is full of unpacked bombardment devices, an electric book of ordinary roses, a flying horse of wild crab language, served up by a poet already well-versed in how a poem walks. Thank you. Next is John Godfrey.
Good evening. You know that last piece, Greg? I'm pretty sure I haven't, Greg? I haven't looked at Fleeing Madly South because it's in a protected place. Mimeograph products tend to really do badly over 50 years. I think that was an introduction to Fleeing Madly South. It says so here too, but I haven't seen my copy in many years. I was very tempted to read something I really liked in this book, which was Ted's review of the first copy of the magazine Art and Literature, which had 4 editors. You'll read it. Like many people in the early 60s and in the culture, young people were behaving this way, to be a young Turk. And Ted really got off on that. He holds Ashbery responsible in this first issue for a lot of lame-ass Brit poets and so on. And then he, at the end, a great deal of appreciation for the inclusion of a number of people, particularly Kenward Elmsley. Now, I didn't do that because it was staring me in the face. Ted supported his friends and sometimes wrote more about them as his friends than about their work. And that's lovely. I like that. He also wrote about my friend, Lewis McAdams, and I'm impelled to read the piece he wrote because in 1965, with only a handful of poets that I had felt like writing poems because of, and they were not such an odd bunch. I was in college, I was 20, and I'd been reading William Carlos Williams' poems from the First World War era into the 20s. I'd found out about Baudelaire, and there was a new translation. I bought Bob Kaufman's book, what is it, Solitudes Out of Loneliness, because it was printed by New Directions, no other reason. And they published Williams, Pound. I said, hey, this got to be cool. And I love that book. I love Kaufman's writing. And Garrett took care of Bob Kaufman's works, too. And very, very wonderful poet that shouldn't be overlooked. So Ted reviewed Lewis McAdams' The Poetry Room. And this is the front side. You see, you get Lewis looking like a wise ass. And on the other side, looking. The story goes like this. And I think I got this straight, but it's been many years. In 1968, Tom Clark got a book with a mainstream publisher. And that was a big deal, man. I mean, it was a tight little world back then. And that was his book, Stones. And it got Tom mentioned in Newsweek magazine, a photo, a piece on him in the fall of '68. And Harper and Row asked him for another manuscript, and he said, I won't do it unless you let me choose 3 other poets, and you publish our books all at the same time. And he got away with it, right? And that's how Ron Patchett's Great Balls of Fire was published, Dick Gallup's Where I Hang My Hat, and Lewis McAdams' The Poetry Room. Now, I don't know, I didn't have to search for this. Came out in it's copyright 1970. I don't remember having it until, it was like the beginning of 1971. This is a brilliant book. Now, I have a relation to Lewis McAdams that is kind of weird. I moved from Albany, I didn't pick up and move. I had to move from Albany, New York, to a town just outside Dallas, Texas. It was like bleeding for 1,500 miles. And I got to go to a school inside Dallas for free. And Lewis was a class ahead of me. I knew about him. Lewis was a performer and an athlete. And then I ended up a class behind him in college. So here I am at the age of 20, having no idea what you can get into if you start writing poems. I mean, I should have been a biologist instead or something like that. I had been writing so frequently, and the other big influence was the electric recordings of Bob Dylan. You know, you'd bringing it all back home. You say, I hope this isn't a whole bunch of other very sophisticated protest songs. You put down the tone arm and you get It's All Over Now Baby Blue, and you say, what the fuck, you know? I felt like since Lewis was getting a reputation through a college literary magazine, maybe I should show them to him. We were acquainted. I knock on his door. I go in. He looks at my stuff seriously, encourages me, and he says, I should loan you some books. He loans me The Tennis Court Oath by John Ashbery. He loans me Second Avenue by Frank O'Hara, which is a totem, very slim little package. He loans me The Dead Lecturer by Leroy Jones. Let's see, Thank You, Kenneth Cole. Opening in the Field by Robert Duncan. The Hotel Wentley Poems by John Wieners. The Donald Allen Anthology from 1959. And the C. mimeograph, The Sonnets. Well, I looked through those things, and I really liked the idea of discontinuity, which I picked up from the few art movies from France I had seen. And the sonnets just killed me. And it was about 2 hours after I'm visiting Lewis that I said, do or die. And look what you get yourself, you know, some 57 years later. So my connection to Ted began there. And within a few months I met Ted, who was then thin. you know. And I didn't understand much about speed. But Ted could almost sometimes, especially if he thought you were some rich kid, I was going to college for free. He could be kind of bullying, and he had a lot of fun with you. I learned how to take it. But the sonnets taught me how to read everything else you could put on the table. His ideas of discontinuity, collage in itself, which is the major product of modernism, where you are denying that one moment, a moment follows another moment. It's part of the same moment. You know, that isn't the way time works. Each moment is totally cut off from the moment before, and we fool ourselves because it makes for a healthier life and probably more regular meals. So Ted wrote a poem from Tom Clark's book Air, which precedes this piece. And if you sit down with Air, you can figure out how many pages into the book Ted went, because he's picking small fragments and making his own poem. In the case of Lewis, this book is truly brilliant, very original. And at the back, there's a long poem reminiscent not only of Biotherm by Frank O'Hara, but of Ted's Tambourine Life, which had a lot of white space. Ted, in his spirit, was a person who could end in the middle of a sentence and then begin again in the same sentence, a manner of stopping time and then starting again. Lewis is all about momentum. So what Ted did, and I figure it's about the first 25 pages of this book, Ted wrote a poem, picking what he wanted, and instead of being an upper middle class Texas cowboy mouth, he's a New England guy from a different social class, and it becomes Ted's poem because he's changing the spirit of Lewis's work into his own spirit. I hope I can read this. I've read it about 5 times in the last week. I'd never seen it before until I had this book in my hands. So at the top of the page, you'll see The Poetry Room by Lewis McAdams, Harper and Row. The name of Ted's poem is Night and Day to Phoebe, who was his wife at that time, Phoebe McAdams, who's now Phoebe Ozuna. And Night and Day, of course, it says, you are the one, and it says Cole Porter. There is a green light right now near the sofa. Animals are stiff in amber light. We all need you, tongue, in this bowl. We move to put on clothes, or vice versa. You know, let's fuck again. Now a skier signals. We are in the sun. Do you ever move? The sun goes down like a boat. The sky undergoes the grace of those children who call from the ocean door. This trance is filled with the juice of the sun. We'd never get home without you, friend. 1,000 friends wave in the headlamp. They disappear in the frozen tower. A man alive, the perennial tongue cuts up from underneath the tower. Sometimes I can't stand it. There is breath rolling among Americans, now raving, as the snow cuts the power lines in the flow trees. Man, we was swamped. And it's time, suddenly, in the parking lot for plain doctor. Night ropes your body. Helplessness revolves and everything circles the globe. If you look for, you'll get the glue of fear. Puns fall out of my mouth. Excuse me, perfect lady. In your faith we go on. Don't throw your love away in your sleep. She is the natural elimination of the mind. She hands me the moon. She's the pussy. Pocket, your cage grows that geared you if you aim at a little more trouble. Dry eyes, that water will go down. It rocks us to the dawn in this room. Joy is dark as it slips away tonight. We are secure in this boat. Help! The breakers bring me what I need. doves, hawks, warblers, cooling pills. Love, the mother, earth, ring of ocean around this quiet room. Land like us, toast the enveloping air, taking it easy, about time. The light is now orange, crazy music in your hair, mine. June, July 1971, Providence. The next reader is Andre Codrescu.
Three memorable things happened in the year that both of Greg and John mentioned. Three things happened to me when I met Ted in 1967. I was then 20 years old kid from Transylvania, trying to pose as a hippie in front of James Spa. And there was Ted with his circle of devotees who were listening intently to his monologue, waiting for the ash on his Chesterfield to fall in his beard so that they might get a chance to say something. So when I got my chance one day, I said, "Ted, I'm a vegetarian now." And Ted, without missing a bit, said, "If it fits in your mouth, it's natural." My next assertion of hippie cred was another day when I said, "Ted, I'm on acid." And he said, "I always wonder what it would be like to kill somebody on acid." Well, that was it. He had me. I followed him around the rest of the day, you know. And my third grand event in that Anno Mirabilis 1967 was when Ted came over to my fifth floor walk-up on Avenue C and saw a copy of The White Goddess by Robert Graves that's open on the kitchen table. So he looked at it and then pointed to the refrigerator and said, "That's your White Goddess." That was a bolt of lightning. I converted to the New York School right there and then. Well, these are just some of my stories about Ted, and I have millions of them, and I tell them every week. So I'm not alone, because everyone who knew Ted personally and three subsequent generations that didn't love to tell Ted stories that they either had or heard. So it occurs to me that in addition to his fabulous poetry and this book of marvelous prose, there is a vast body of work by Ted Berrigan that is bigger than this book and more voluminous than all of his poetry, namely the oral epic of Ted Berrigan as told by his friends and admirers. He's an American folk hero like Bigfoot, or Johnny Appleseed, as Eleanor Nowen put it. And speaking of Eleanor, I am happy to announce here that she and I will be launching a podcast. We will interview people on their encounters with Ted's oral genius. We'll come to you every week for a half hour with stories about Ted. As told by you, you know who you are. I will read now two reviews by Ted of two books by one of his best friends and mine, the great poet Anselm Hollow. I think he named Anselm after Anselm Hollow because he said when Big Anselm talked too loud, he'd say to his baby, "Shut up, Anselm." But he didn't mean you. I mean, he meant if you're in the same room. I mean. So here they are, these two reviews of Anselm Hollow, Maya by Anselm Hollow. Anselm's poems, many of them are deceptively simple. They, like the poet himself, are exceptionally civilized. By civilized, I mean genuinely civilized, that is, with no proportionate loss of spleen. The hits in the poems take place in your head when you read them, but the poems are not a head trip. The head speaks out to the head connected to the heart. There is no bullshit in these poems. The voice we hear is Anselm Hollow speaking, gracious, courteous, tough-minded, Everything else, history, culture, and poetry, proceed as a matter of course. What the poems seem to be about is how to live in terms of doing so. Ansom's poems are very mysterious. They will catch you by surprise without seeming to be doing so. And another review, later review of Sensation, also by Anselm Hollow, I like to think that I can read, and I wouldn't like to think that I am blind. But it is only the past 5 years that I have been reading with eyes wide open the poems of Anselm Hollow, and what a great pleasure it is to do so. I would claim without any hesitation for us that he is an American poet, were there any questions. But for all that, he may be a Chinese poet or a Finn. His poems have been going by your eyes in the magazines of our world lately with ever more frequency, and they are available in books too. And then Ted goes on to note what books and quotes 2 poems of Anselm's, and I'm going to read 2 of them, and they're short. At this point, the moon starts to take on a little brown or gray, as opposed to being so very bright as it appears from the earth. Up in the Andes, an old Peruvian in a featherwork mantle sits listening to his god. His god is playing Looney Tunes on the organ of novelty. While down below in Iowa City, a snail door, a small door, a snail door. He's freaking out in a drugstore, showing and beating on the other customers, yelling, "This is my drugstore, get out, get out." The proprietor calls the cops, and they take him out because it isn't his drugstore. A large, unclear device explodes in Alaska. Furious hurricanes sweep through the banana fields. Old man in featherwork mantle knows the innate beat of all things. He is engaged in expressing unobservable realities in terms of observable phenomena. A great body of tender and intimate works to sleep beside him later, like a large, friendly lioness who loves me, the old Peruvian. And this is a poem after Tu Fu, also from a sort of a Chinese period of Ted's, but written by Anselm. After Tu Fu, drinking some cheap but good wine after Tu Fu, 2:30 a.m., using all this potential, not 1 minute of my life have I wasted. You drunkard poet uncles, I like you a lot. My nephews don't. They tired of the twang you've been putting out. But here, have some wine, have a good cry. So sorry. I also took the. Okay, sorry about that. And I am very sorry. And here is the next reader, speaker, the president of poetry, Anne Waldman.
What a great gathering in Ted's church. And thank you, Alice and Eddie and Anselm and Nick Sturm for this amazing volume and for bringing us all together. I'm just going to do a couple of things, but I'm going to start with a little letter from Ted and then move into the Cage interview, which was a cultural intervention at the time. I can't remember the big scene about the grant, and anyway, it's a long story. Okay. Let me get some glasses. Yeah, amazing. Okay. So this was something for me, July 19th, 71. Dear Annie, you're getting to be the Sonia Sanchez of the New York school. What a tough broad. Alas, I don't have any, I've been writing to him about this Charles Reznikoff tape that he had absconded with. Alas, I don't have any Charles Reznikoff tape, though I did play it at your ex-house. Probably Harris sold it for money to buy smack. Last time I saw it, it was on a footlocker in the corner near the window next to a syringe with blood in it. I mean, he loved to torture me. Anyway, I do have a tape by me and you, but I need it to listen to all the time so I can be great. However, when I go to Bolinas Wednesday, 2 days from now, I'll take it along and copy it via my tape recorder and Tom's. I hope I send the tape, but if I don't, you know me and mail, I'll hand it to you personally when you and the star of Another World wander out to here. Okay? Don't curse. Now you know I love you. It's not my fault. I'm a shiftless, ne'er-do-well, irresponsible, lackadaisical dreamer. Love is what counts. I love The Last World and my goofy collaboration with the spaceman. His poems are certainly getting terrific. Larry's too. Tomorrow I read with Robert Cyclops at the San Francisco Small-Time Star Scene. We will freak their balls off as we did at the National Poetry Festival, where the stars were number 1, Philip Whalen, and number 2, me. I'm getting to be a regular Elmer Gantry of the public platform. But best of all, there was me running a seminar on collaborations and making Phil, Bob C., Joel, Paul Blackburn, incidentally, a great star himself, Anselm, etc., and 20 students write one I wish line each. Phil Whalen wrote in his impeccable scribble, I wish lasagna verde. Joel wrote, I wish unlimited bar credit. I have all the pages here. If you were doing Another World, I would type all up as a poem. They read terrifically, about 25 lines. Bob Creeley and Phil said, what this poetry festival needs is Ann Waldman. Ann, you should push a little and horn in on such things like I do. Me and Phil were the 2 guys who asked it into that scene, and we hogged a lot of the action once there. I told Phil, you're the president now, babe. And he said, sadly, it's true. Charles Olson told me the same thing 2 years ago. How about that? After Whalen's reading, Anselm, who was also terrific, and come to think of it, who was also butted his way in, turned to me and said, well, we came here to be told, and now we've been told. Whoopee! I wish you were here to frown at me and make me giggle. Love and kisses, Teddy. And then it's a little note on the cage. It says, this was 1966. Saturday, haha, Friday, June 3rd. Ted Berrigan fabricated an interview with John Cage, which was published in Mother magazine, all without Cage's knowledge. Joe told me that Kenneth told him that John Cage called up John Ashbery and asked him who I was and if I was putting him down or what in the interview. 3 exclamation points. John told him no, that I admired him very much. Ha! If he had any brains, he would have seen that he actually wrote the interview. I think this is another Flippers interview. So, the following interview is pieced together from a series of tape-recorded interviews with John Cage during his recent visit to New York. They were made at parties, in flats, and in taxis. What about Marshall McLuhan? Just this. The media is not a message. I would like to sound a word of warning to Mr. McLuhan. To speak is to lie. To lie is to collaborate. How does that relate? Do you know the Zen story of the mother who had just lost her only son? She is sitting by the side of the road weeping, and the monk comes along and says, why is she weeping? Oh, another drugstore glasses. Why is she weeping? And he says, she's lost her only son. And so he hits her on the head and says, there, that'll give you something to cry about. Yes, somebody should have kicked that monk in the ass. I agree. Somebody said that Brecht wanted everybody to think alike. I want everybody to think alike. But Brecht wanted to do it through communism in a way. Russia is doing it under government. It's happening here by itself without being under a strict government. So if it's working without trying, why can't it work without being communist? Everybody looks and acts alike, and we're getting more and more that way. I think everybody should be a machine. I think everybody should be alike. Isn't that like pop art? Yes, that's what pop art is, liking things, which incidentally is a pretty boring idea. Does the fact that it comes from a machine diminish its value to you? Certainly not. I think that any artistic product must stand or fall in what's there. A chimpanzee can do an abstract painting. If it's good, that's great. Mary McCarthy has characterized you as a sour utopian. Is that accurate? I do definitely mean to be taken literally. Yes, all of my work is directed against those who are bent through stupidity or design on blowing up the planet. Well, that is very interesting, Mr. Cage, but I wanted to know what you think in the larger context, i.e. the utopia. I don't know exactly what you mean there. I think the prestige of poetry is very high in the public esteem right now. Perhaps height is not the right yardstick, but it is perhaps higher than ever. If you can sell poetry, you can sell anything. No, I think it's a wonderful time for poetry, and I really feel that something is about to boil. And in answer to your question about whether poetry could resume something like the Elizabethan spread, I think it's perfectly possible that this could happen in the next 4 or 5 years. All it needs is the right genius to come along and let it fly. And old Mansfield, I was pleased to see the other day, celebrating his 90th birthday, I think said that there are still lots of good tales to tell. I thought that was very nice, and it's true too. Do you think that is, are you satisfied with the way we are presently conducting the war in Vietnam? I'm highly dissatisfied with the way we are waging this nasty war. Incidentally, your rooms are very beautiful. Nothing incidental about it at all. These are lovely houses. There are 2 for sale next door, a bargain too, but they're just shells. They've got to be all fixed up inside, as this one was too. They were just tearing them down when I got the Poetry Society over here to invite Hai Sobolov, the only millionaire poet, to come down and read, and he was taken in hand and shown this house next door, the one that I grew up in, and what a pitiful state it was in. Pickaxes had already gone through the roof, and so he bought 4 of them and fixed this one up for our use as long as we live rent-free. Not bad. Tell me, have you ever thought of doing soundtracks for Hollywood movies? Why not? Any composer of genuine ability should work in Hollywood today. Get the money. However, few screen composers possess homes in Bel Air, illuminated swimming pools, wives in full-length mink coats, 3 servants, and that air of tired genius turned sour utopian. Without that today, you are nothing. Alas, money buys pathetically little in Hollywood beyond the pleasures of living in an unreal world, associating with a group of narrow people who think, talk, and drink, most of them bad people, and the doubtful pleasure of watching famous actors and actresses guzzle up the juice and stuff the old gut in some of the rudest restaurants in the world. Me, I have never given it a thought. Tell me about silence. Sure, you never know what publishers are up to. I had the damnedest time with silence. My publishers, H, R, and W, at first were very excited about doing it, and then they handed it over to a young editor who wanted to rewrite it entirely and proceeded to do so. He made a complete hash of it, and I protested about this, and the whole thing, the contract was about to be signed, and they withdrew it because of this impasse. The publisher, who's my friend, said, well, John, we never really took this seriously, did we? So why don't we just forget it? And I replied, damn it all, I did take it seriously. I want to get it published. Well, then they fired this young man who was rewriting me, and everything was peaceful, but there was still some static about irregularities of tone in silence. So I said, well, I'll just tone them down a little, tune the whole thing up, so to speak. But I did nothing of the sort. Of course not. I simply changed the order. I sent it back, rearranged, and then they wanted me to do something else. Finally, I just took the whole thing somewhere else. What was your father like? I don't want to speak of him. My mother detested him. What sort of person was your mother? Very religious, very, but now she is crazy. She lay on top of me when I was tied to the bed. She writes me all the time, begging me to return. Why do we have to speak of my mother? Do you move in patterns? Yes. It isn't so much repeating patterns, it's repetition of similar attitudes that lead to further growth. Everything we do keeps growing. The skills are there and are used in different ways each time. The main thing is to do faithfully those tasks assigned by oneself in order to further awareness of the body. Do you believe that all good art is unengaging? Yes, I do. Then what about beauty? Many dirty hands have fondled beauty, made it their banner. I'd like to chop off those hands because I do believe in that banner. The difference is that art is beauty, which the beatniks naturally lack. The beatniks, notably Ed Sanders, are being harassed by the police lately. Do you approve? On the contrary, the problem is that the police are unloved. The police in New York are all paranoid. They were so hateful for so long that everybody got to hate them, and that just accumulated and built up. The only answer to viciousness is kindness. The trouble is that the younger kids just haven't realized that you've got to get to make love to the police in order to solve the police problem. But how do you force love on the police? Make love to the police. We need highly trained squads of love makers to go everywhere and make love. But there are so many police, it is a practical problem. Yes, I know. It will certainly take time, but what a lovely project. Do you think it is better to be brutal than to be indifferent? Yes, it is better to be brutal than indifferent. Some artists prefer the stream of consciousness. Not me, I'd rather beat people up. Say something about happenings. You are credited with being the spiritual daddy of the happening. Happenings are boring. When I hear the word happening, I spew wildly into my lunch. But Alan Capro calls you the only living happening. Alan Capro can go eat a Hershey bar. Well put. Now to take a different tack, let me ask you, what about sex? Sex is a biologic weapon insofar as I can see it. I feel that sex, like every other human manifestation, has been degraded for anti-human purposes. I had a dream recently in which I returned to the family home and found a different father and mother in the bed, though they were still somehow my father and mother. What I would like in the way of theater is that somehow a method would be devised, a new form that would allow each member of the audience at a play to watch his own parents, young again, make love. Fuck, that is, not court. That certainly would be different, wouldn't it? What other theatrical event interests you? Death. Death. The time, birth, death gimmick. I went recently to see Dr. No at 42nd Street. It's a fantastic movie, so cool. I walked outside and somebody threw a cherry bomb right in front of me in the big crowd, and there was blood. I saw blood on people and all over. I felt like I was bleeding all over. I saw in the paper that week that more and more people are throwing them. Artists, too. It's just part of the scene, hurting people. How does love come into all of this? It doesn't. It comes later. Love is memory. In the immediate present, we don't love. Life is too much with us. We lust, wilt, snort, swallow, gobble, hustle, nuzzle, etc. Later, memory flashes images swathed in nostalgia and yearning. We call that love. Ha! Better to call it madness. Is everything erotic to you? Not lately. No, I'm just kidding. Of course, everything is erotic to me. If it isn't erotic, it isn't interesting. Is life serious? Perhaps. How should I know? In any case, one must not be serious. Not only is it absurd, but a serious person cannot have sex. Very interesting. Why not? If you have to ask, you'll never know. Thank you, Ted. Simon Pettit.
Ted was a Scorpio. Alice is a Scorpio. Louis Warsh is a Scorpio. Joanne Kiger was a Scorpio. Phoebe McAdams was a Scorpio. I'm going to finish with a little poem he wrote called Scorpio, but there's a beautiful piece in this book, which is a translation of Max Jacob's ruminations on the Scorpio sign, the astrological sign. And I won't read it all because it's a long night, but I'll read a little. And then I'll finish with that little poem. Scorpio, the dog, the serpent, the wolf, the wild boar, the rat, the crab, the apple, the turnip, the watercress, the leek, the rhubarb, the dandelion, the gladiola, the earth, meat, rust, the donut, slaughterhouses, furnaces, soldiers, hunters, butchers, pirates, the audacious, the cruel, the angry, the irreverent, the perfidious, the arrogant, the vociferous, the generation of vipers. Stones, garnet, jasper, porphyry. Metal, iron. Color, bold red. Flavor, strong and sharp. Perfume, heather, sandalwood. Residence, drum, tambourine. Famous Scorpios, Beaulieu, I'm not going to read them, because I want to edit this down. Qualities, emblem, a man gutting a wolf. Courage and steadfastness of purpose and coolness in action. The elementary nature of Scorpio is reptilian. Scorpio represents the great procreative power, intra-atomic energy, seminal energy, and sex. The strong sexuality and passions of the Scorpion are indicative in his venomous sting. But two other symbols of Scorpio are less known, the eagle and the dove, which may be understood this way. The first, taking wing of the mind in its inaccessible places. The second, the Holy Spirit. It is in this second house alone that Scorpio becomes human, and it is no longer to be afraid. Scorpio is a source of life and death. Its dispensations are extreme and contradictions. Its spirit is revolutionary, making use of the destructive powers to latently rebuild and be stronger. A symbol of Scorpio is silver. Qualities: logic, power, resistance. Defects: cruelty, jealousy, intransigence. An instinctive nature, passionate, implacable, spontaneous, and never disheartened. Single-hearted persons who do unto others as they do unto themselves. A sense of reality, of matter as tangible, not given to philosophy, reverie, contemplation. A conscience which is primitive but solid. Operators. They are not ideologists but activists. They are masters of themselves and without anxiety. Their emotions have little outward effect upon them and do not show on their faces. Their disposition, nevertheless, is sometimes very irritable. There is always something aggressive in the manner with which they regard you. They are capable of leadership and of command, a great influence over the psychology of others. They know how to talk to their inferiors. Their instinct is very powerful. They have a vivid sense of good and bad, but up and down, right and wrong, right and left. They are a quick study, and they don't lose track of the way. They have a tendency to scorn or make fun of those whom they fail to understand, through defects of their imagination. A tendency to confuse the limits of their understanding with the limits of human nature. His intelligence, says Balzac in describing a Scorpio, is capable of conducting itself well at any point of the circumference, while lacking the capacity to encompass the compass. They have little of pliancy and adapt themselves with difficulties as to circumstances. Brusque manners, language rude but direct, plenty secrets in their affairs. They have great ambition and great intensity. They are capable of extraordinary resistance. They are quick and headstrong. They never surrender, not one thing. They persist in their projects, for better or worse. Elegant and proper, the gaiety of a child. Never give an inch. They stand inside their quietness when taken. I'm going to stop there and just finish with a poem. It's Ted's poem called Scorpio. Scorpio, if I don't love you, I won't let it show, but I'll make it clear by never letting you know. And if I love you, I will love you true, insofar as love itself will do. And while I live, I'll be whatever I am, whose constant, impure fire is outwardly only a man. And the next reader is Alice Notley.
Hello. I'm going to end the reading by reading the last work in the book, which is Harry Fainlight, in memoriam, died 1982, London. Harry Fainlight was a British poet, and he was involved with C Magazine, and Ted knew him in the early years and was very fond of him and loved his poetry. And I never met him, but I was aware that there was this connection between Ted and Harry, and Harry apparently led a very difficult life, and it got more and more difficult, and I didn't know this. And one day, not too long before he died, he called Ted up, and Ted made a sort of, they decided to meet. They said they would meet at a certain day, an hour in Tompkins Square Park, and then Ted went there, and he said to me, "I don't think he's going to show up, but I have to go." And he went, and Harry didn't show up. He waited an hour for Harry, and he came back and said he didn't show up. And then a little bit later, I don't really remember how much time passed. Allen Ginsberg called and said Harry had died and proposed that they write pieces for the newsletter, the Poetry Project newsletter, and Ted wrote this really lovely obit. Harry Fainlight, in memoriam, died 1982, London. Many great years are taken away. May no fate willfully misunderstand me, but duration, durability, being something I have never questioned in me, it is just so that I cannot be surprised that Harry is dead. For it is that fate, death, early and still late, that Harry had so unquestionably taken as his own from before I met him. Speaking with Ron Paget over the phone earlier tonight, I heard Ron once again say those words, poète maudit, and was struck with how little severity one could hear and even use that phrase, something I only first realized 20 years ago upon reading Allen Ginsberg's fulsome praise of John Wiener's. In an account of first hearing a tape of Wiener's reading, Allen himself indicated a difficulty with the bare text of Wiener's Hotel Wentley poems. He didn't get it at first, for it was in the music. With Harry, too, it was in the music and in how achingly beautiful the lyric is in the hands of someone who makes it in the throat. A lamp creates a glade is one of Harry's great couplets from a selection of his arranged by himself that I published in C Magazine in 1964. The whole arrangement was titled by Harry, Ah, London, and the reader was referred to a sister selection from Fuck You, a magazine of the arts, entitled Oh, London. In 1963, I moved back downtown to 630 East 9th Street in New York City and into the rush of the days of the underground movie explosion, the heyday of Le Metro Coffee House as the center of poetry readings, Allen's return from India, and the emergence of Ed Sanders' Fuck You Gang, the C Magazine crowd of soi-disant Tulsa poets, and the ongoing pursuits of the Kelly Rothenberg camp. Harry Fainlike circulated through all of these, appearing, as even I did, into Le Metro from the street, there to be brought together, perhaps by Jerry Malanga, whose importance as someone who brought people together was central as a crowd of new, young, nearly certifiable poets. The regulars ranged in age in 1964 from 17 to 30, boys and girls, black and white, queer and straight, a new class drawn from any other, the class of 65. Harry and I met like two boys in a John Buchan novel, a Yank with no connotations other than friend on that word, and a Brit, one who, as it turned out, had American citizenship by birth, but had grown up entirely in England and was Oxford London to the core, so much so that he was even half Jewish, and so, of course, cosmopolitan. It is very hard to see this. When rather cosmopolitan, urban rather than urbane, and not one bit middle Atlantic, as, say, Bill Merwin was, and Anselm Hollow would not be. We liked one another from the first, like they say, and spent long hours and nights in Ratner's, comparing maps of the worlds of poetry, our world as we had boyishly taken it to be each. Harry was a serious, intent listener with great, handsome sweep of brow and piercing nose above long, sensitive lips. I thought he was beautiful. He could blush, and his laugh, part full, part giggle, crackling like a croak of a raven in the middle, encouraged one to greater earnestnesses, which still now do not seem extravagances as they didn't then. Gleefully earnest, we discussed like shop girls everyone, Allen himself, and Harry recounted to me his own saying to Allen, "I want your power," and Allen's cheerful reply, "You can have it." Peter Orlovsky, no less. Harry recognized further depths than he knew when he came upon them, and further sheer physical strength. John Wiener's virgin daughter of Mother Mary's sorrows. Harry was severe with John only, for he recognized his own fate and its dangers, and was audibly heard to tisk when John would veer beautifully close to playing the role that was each of theirs for real in a poem at a reading. And Frank O'Hara, John Ashbery, and Kenneth Koch, whose banners small as they then were, Ron and I carried as we rode our donkeys into the fray. Harry found Frank's cheerfulness distressing. Irish, I said, and his strengths disconcerting, and after careful brooding consideration, found it necessary to confront Frank at a party, and alas, all because of me and my insistence, I'm afraid. For Harry was vanquished with a smile by a courtier with self-evident friendliness, approaching Frank while Frank was in conversation with Bill Bergson or John Ashbery. He said abruptly, "Frank, I've been reading your poetry a lot and thinking about you a lot, and I've come to the conclusion that it's not all that great." And waited. And Frank, without missing a beat, turned a son of a smile on him and said to him laughingly, putting his hand on Harry's arm as he did so, "Oh, stop it," with rising inflection. There was no malice there, no patronizing, only recognition of what play we were all in, maybe. Telling me of the incident a few moments after it happened, Harry was rueful, but not chastened. I was actually wittier than he was, he complained to me, and I've always loved him for treating me equal at that moment, and always loved myself and Frank and Harry and all of us there in that room for being there. In New York City in 1965, Harry was watching, as Harry was always there, seeing, watching, when Paul Blackburn came over to me in Le Metro in early 1964 and asked me if I thought I would like to have a Wednesday night reading of my own in a month or two. And he was glad for me, and glad to have been there to see it, and glad to be able to say to me some minutes afterwards, gleefully and warm and boyish and radiant with friendship and comradeship both, as indeed there is a difference, "I saw him do it, I saw him thinking it, and I saw him get up and come over and ask you." I was glad too, and though we didn't embrace and laugh, as it was neither the time nor the place, I embrace you now, Harry. Goodbye, old friend.
Thank you to all of our readers. Thank you for being here. Thank you, City Lights. Thank you to the Poetry Project staff and interns and volunteers. Our next events are Friday, Miren Arsenios will read with Iman Mursal, and then on Wednesday, November 16th, Brenda Coltis and Anna Moskavakis will read. Good night.